Hello and welcome everybody here to the next transmission on the Path of the Jaguar. My name, of course, is David, and today I'm joined by my friend, teacher, and guide from the Stellar Nations Pathway, Leslie Shankman. Hi, Leslie, how are you?
I'm good, David. Thank you. Good, glad to be here.
Today we're going to be looking at two of the Stellar Nations codes, we can say, the Great Felines and the Dragons, as part of this Path of the Jaguar. Obviously, there's a very clear link with the felines, but we're also going to be exploring the element of the dragons, because today's talk is going to be really about the physical body and what we carry within our physical body, sometimes traumas or codes from other lifetimes or types of wounding. And speaking from experience recently, that sometimes we can't always understand why they won't heal, where did they come from, or what's the origin point. So, Leslie, I know that you've done something that you always do an amazing job of, which is to make a presentation. But would you like to preface this talk in any way, or do you want to dive straight in?
Okay, with this first slide, what I'd like to do is just set up a little context for what we're going to talk about, because I recognize that some of us are not familiar with the stellar nations, which is absolutely fine. You don't need to be. But it helps to understand the context that the following information is going to come in. And really, the understanding with the stellar nation is that the stars are sentient, they're worlds, and our souls, aspects of our souls, live on different stars. So essentially, we really have concurrent lives going. We have lives going in the galaxy on many different stars, and then we're a physical distillate of these stars in our physical body. And essentially, we've designed this particular life. We've taken different stars because the stars or our stellar aspect represent our ongoing consciousness. And we've taken different stars, we've created a blueprint, we've come into the physical, and we're bringing with us gifts and challenges. And we're coming into the physical to evolve, really, to evolve not just our physical selves, but also our galactic selves. And you might call the stars the cells in our light body, and they are passing information. I mean, it's a big body, and we exist on a spirit, soul, and physical level, and we run codes through these levels. In the stellar nations, the supposition is that there are 13 soul families. It's kind of like our galactic DNA. They're forms and frames of experiencing creation. We have all of them in us as cosmic humans. We may have different emphasis on other ones, just like everybody has a genetic history as a physical being, we also do as an ongoing consciousness. So on the physical, the dragon and the great feline are both codes that are experienced through the physical plane. Sorry. And then we're going to see that in our cosmic history, there's been a mating of the dragon and the great feline, which created a hybrid feline and dragon. So I want to take us through the cosmic history because so much, as I alluded to in the introduction, so much of what we meet, and you said it too, David, in our present life is really triggering off something from our bigger ongoing consciousness, and all of us really who are trying to evolve together as well as individually. And as I mentioned, there's a cosmic law that says that things are not resolved inside will be launched again as latent shadows, and they arise to be measured against the circumstances of our lives.
I think we call that karma, right?
Ken, yeah. So we've got two stellar nations we're going to look at, and they're both warrior nations in the stellar nations. Each family has kind of a mission. The warrior is one, there's teachers, there's healers, there's messengers. But the dragon and the great feline are warrior nations. And the noblest idea of a warrior is that a warrior would give its life even to stand up for a principle. And the dragons were asked to be keepers of divine order, divine power, divine will, make sure that the heavenly laws are obeyed. It's the heart of the warrior. So what I want to do is go through aspects of our galactic history, which show us where there have been woundings, because that's really the latent shadows that we're bringing into our incarnations to work on. And with the dragons, the very first thing that happened is the cosmic humans had been assigned to be chalices for the 13 stellar nations. That's our mission, actually. Our mission is to hold these 13 ways of expressing or experiencing and to balance and harmonize them, which is not necessarily easy, but that's our developmental path. So the dragons were, the humans initially were holding all 13 stellar nations. And the dragons were given control of the elements because they're warriors and they needed control of the elements. They created worlds, they destroyed worlds, they protected worlds, and they often used the elements. And they were the first 5 initiations of the dragon are in fact in the elements, you know, how to master air, but for that it's metaphysical too, how to master your thoughts, master water, how to master your emotions. So dragons have a deep training in the elements. We know the whole side of the dragons that uses the elements. So we're not going to get so much into that here. You may want to bring it in, David. But the humans were also given control of the elements, but for different reasons. It's because they lived in the planetary worlds and in fact were co-creators with the fairies and the elves. And they were given control of the elements because the creator said to them, you have the use of these elements, but they will be your mirrors. So for instance, if we're abusing something, it's going to come back at us in the environment. It's going to be shown. We're going to have floods or storms or something. So there came a point that the cosmic humans, who had been given quite a special mission, really, beloved of the creator, co-creators, given the right to hold all this, started feeling very superior. That was their shadow. And they decided they needed to push out all these 13 nations. What are they? I don't know who I am. They picked on the dragons first because the dragons had the elements. So there was this competition there. And there was huge fights on Earth. It may even be harking back to when we had dinosaurs and we think a meteorite hit the Earth. It could have been a result of the War of the Elements because there were massive firestorms and windstorms and floods as literally both sides threw the elements around. Now the dragons were defeated. So this is the first kind of wound. They were pushed out. And we have to ask, I'm not going to answer this, I don't know. This is the kind of thing we just have to think about. So remember, the dragons are part of us. Everything I talk about is going to seem like it's out there, but it's in here also, or as well. So did this part of us that was asked to guard divine will feel that we failed to protect divine will? Was there some kind of latent shame, guilt? Did that create a latent drive for revenge? None of this is necessarily conscious, but these are the kinds of circumstances where these things come up. That's what we're going to recognize. Later on, and I don't know if there's a later on because we don't know about time, but at another point, the dragon commander indeed had a huge lust for power and created sort of a vibratory, anytime a huge sensation goes out in creation, it creates a vibration that actually asks a question to every sentient being, like, what do you want to do? So the dragons broke out into a huge lust for power. And now I'm going to hold that on the side for a minute because we're going to meet the great felines and then we're going to see what happens. So the stellar nation of the great felines are also warriors. They're keepers of the heart of freedom and they're warriors of the goddess. So we basically have a yang kind of expression with the dragons. They're very disciplined. They have a commander. They learn by 8 initiations. With the great felines, warriors of the goddess, when we say that they're guarding freedom, it's sovereignty. It's the right to be connected to the creator and let creation run through you. It's a very yin approach because it's the feminine understanding of what's right, what makes creation whole. And they will protect the winged lions, who are the rightful leaders who let the divine frequencies run through them. But they will also, if anything turns despotic, even if it's a vaunted winged lion, their job is to go against despotic influences, because the great felines are really protectors of the oppressed, and making sure people are given their rightful rights, which is basically why they're called the keepers of free will. So it's hard though, because felines, being cats, their nature started getting to, when the vibratory unrest went out with Khan and the power, the great felines didn't feel like they wanted power, because that wasn't in their nature. But it did sort of create a disturbance in them. And it was, well, we're independent. Everybody should be independent. No one can command me. And they started going off in groups and not wanting to do their duty. And they started feeling kind of superior in a way, because they thought, well, no one understands that we shouldn't have a ruler. They thought it was a forward idea. It is actually a very forward idea of true democracy, but the time wasn't right for it. So we should know, as we go on, if we feel we have a lot of great feline codes, one of the hardest parts of working with a great feline code is to work in a group. And that's something that we really need to learn, because as we move towards the whole ascension process and the Aquarian age, all that's changing. Okay, so the restive urge happened on the great felines, and Khan kind of picked up on that, and he gave his dragons the command to go have a love affair with the great felines, because he thought, wouldn't this be great for us to create a hybrid warrior that would have the best of the great feline and the dragon, be, sleek and subtle and yet strong. So indeed, there was a love affair that happened on the star Sherton, which is at Virgo 1346. And essentially, this star is the place of the pillow talk, where strategic secrets were revealed. The cats gave up secrets about how and where they guarded the winged lion rulers. What happened there? I'm sorry. I went into, I've never had this happen. Okay, there we go. So what happened is all the secrets are out, and the Shadow Alliance, at this point, there was a growing Shadow Alliance. We had the falling members who were hungry for power in the angels and the dragons, particularly, later joined by the male serpents and the arthropods. But here the angels and the dragons got together, and they just created the most immoral attack on the winged lion and the great felines, because they went in with an invisibility shield, and it just wasn't nice. And they had all these secrets that they had gotten illicitly. So the place of this attack was Algeba in the Leo constellation. It's the neck of the lion. And this is a point of great feline betrayal and defeat. And actually, cosmically, in our cosmic stories, it's the first time that light was defeated by the dark. So it was kind of a wake-up call, because what the creator had said in this creation cycle is that we were to explore the dark to know the light. That was the command given to the cosmic human. And the whole understanding of what the dark was just wasn't in consciousness yet. But this was a wake-up call. Now, I also bring this up because if you have a lot of feline codes and you have neck problems, this is something that can happen. You can feel that vulnerability of the attack. And if you're carrying that, it can come out with lifelong or different kinds of neck problems.
Sorry, Leslie, I just have to comment on that because that's really interesting for me. I've suffered with neck issues most of my life. And when I went to see a chiropractor once, he actually thought I'd been involved in a head-on car crash. Such was the damage in my neck. And I'm like, I don't remember having a car crash. So this is kind of what we were alluding to at the beginning, right? Sometimes we have these injuries that somehow even the doctors can't really explain, but they're already with us, or somehow they happen to us, they manifested. And I think it's really fascinating. And also, just to add a point there, I find it so interesting that these points of difficult cosmic stories often happen at the 29th degree of a sign. I know we've talked about this before, but I just saw it again there, 2957 of Leo. We have another one of these cosmic stories. So the anaretic degrees, from what we see in the cosmic history codes, often tell a much more difficult story that somehow does get represented in the day-to-day Western astrology, we can say. So, and again, here I mean, this is 28 degrees of Aries, but it's not far off that anaretic degree also, right?
Yeah, no, actually, now that you're saying that, I'm thinking of a few things. You're right about that.
Or Bungulu's another one that comes immediately to mind.
Well, yeah, and yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, even a lot of the Pleiades, they're not necessarily, but it's an initiation type of thing. They're at the end of
Sorry, I took you off course there, but it's just something that popped into my mind.
no, no, it's
I
something
have
to
my
think about.
Antares code with me, so I'm wrestling in my bag to pull it out because now you've got me thinking. But please continue, and I'll shut up.
So what happened? Many, many, many great felines were killed at that point. And there was a mad rush for those who didn't die to get out, to go somewhere. And the dragons had cruelly cut off a lot of the exit points. The last place they could go and get out to was the Andromeda Galaxy, which those who survived did. And then there were some great felines left in the galaxy, but not a lot. So what happened at that point is the Milky Way galaxy tilted into a yang dominance. And essentially then the great feline stars, where our great feline soul particles live and learn, were essentially kind of vacated in the Milky Way galaxy. So what that's meant is that the low radiations or sort of energy information coming from them means there's less soul input to our physical bodies if we have a lot of great feline codes. And we can have a weaker body because of that. Now, the good news is we'll get there, but that's starting to change. And I think that that's part of our responsibility, actually, to be aware of how, when we become aware of this, we can, during these days, really start to work in this container with that idea of welcoming this energy back. So the other thing that we have to realize is there were hybrid children created, and they really didn't turn out to be the perfect combination. You know, they were either too much of one or the other, but mothers were horrified of them, if they even had mothers, because their mothers might have died. Now, some of the hybrids made it over to the Andromeda Galaxy. Some of them were just left kind of roaming as children. Nobody wanted to touch them. Their mothers were either dead or afraid to come near them because they had been so betrayed, and they were afraid the dragon aspect would come out. Then Khan very cruelly ordered the fathers to try to round them up. And then he put them through extensive training to get the best of the hybrids. And if you didn't make it, you were just killed. So there's a very deep wound here. We'll get more into how we might feel if we were either a hybrid child or a hybrid parents, because as I said, a lot were left in the Milky Way galaxy. And, you know, if you've ever had that feeling, I mean, there's many reasons, but this could be one of them. Yeah. Lost, lonely, isolated. Who am I? What am I? You may have a hybrid heritage.
Do you think the saber-toothed tigers are somehow, if we're thinking about that whole kind of period with the dinosaurs, the sort of the saber-toothed tigers are somewhat slightly after that. I'm wondering whether we can perceive them. Is your picture down there was like made me
look
think.
at that. You have a good question there, because maybe it's a little bit of a genetic anomaly that comes through. Like everything we're saying, and you just alluded to it with, you know, your neck, anything that exists, anything that's physical doesn't come in on the physical first. It always comes down from the emotional or other realms. But now what I'm suggesting is it's beyond the emotional. It's in this larger galactic container of our history.
It's in the soul traumas, I think. That's perhaps how I would
Yeah,
describe it. These are soul experiences that somehow, as part of our coding, we bring into this particular experience and they manifest somehow. So maybe we can say the saber-toothed tiger went through its own process similar to that and ended up looking like that for some reason because its genetics got mashed up. I don't know. It's just the image prompted
that's
me
a
to
good
think
thought.
about that.
Um,
Yeah. Anyway.
yeah. And what I want to say is I say cosmic history, and I'm getting so much about trying to change my thinking about time that I'm like, no, these are just energetic flows that are all happening, right? And
Right,
influence.
it's not that they happen, they are still
It's
happening.
not like this
We're going to be
happens
talking about this a
sequentially.
lot, right? Time doesn't exist. I mean, we've been talking about future self at some point, Leslie, and I had Bella point out to me recently, well, that's also not correct. There is no future self. So how are you communicating with it? Where is it? I'm like, that's a really good point. I need to think about that. It's going to come up later, probably in one of the other transmissions on this journey. But I think that these are really, really important questions for us to ask ourselves, to keep breaking down our sense of self so that we can start to perceive ourselves
Right,
as
right.
perhaps made up of more cosmic codes.
Well, the other thing is if we think of wanting to move into a fifth dimensional reality, we really are then just a receptive force really for creation. So it's going to be much more present, much more kind of a dandelion type existence, I think. And I think that when we're doing things like this, we're starting to train ourselves in essence, or, take off what we need to start to get into the understanding that, whoa, there's a whole different orientation. All right, so you can imagine we're talking about these energetic patterns, absolute shock, and trauma. Now, this still exists. As I said, the light defeated by the dark, unrightful, sudden, shocking expulsion, which was a betrayal while being loyal to upholding a divine assignment of guarding divine will, free will, and sovereignty. Betrayal by your own brothers and sisters, anger, rage, vengeance, guilt, shame. Then we've got abandonment, confusion, catatonia, vacancy, detached, loss, victim, fear, defeat, isolated, anxiety, or you become a total loner, avoid communal activities. So any one of these patterns are just huge, either in isolation or together.
I was going to say, I'm sure some of us can probably identify with all of those, not
Right.
necessarily independently of each other either. But it goes to show you, I think, Leslie, just the point that we're trying to, I think, already make in this transmission, which is that we come in with a lot of stuff. And this incarnation, especially, I think, for all of us, is our chance to resolve these things at the soul level so that we can elevate, we can ascend, however we want to look at this,
Yeah.
into a place where time doesn't exist and we can still perceive all of these aspects of ourselves happening simultaneously because they're in us. So it's not like they happen, they're still happening within me. So is that the past? Is
Right.
that the present? Or what is that? I think this is
No,
another big question to
exactly.
ask ourselves.
Exactly. Now, when those great felines arrived in the Andromeda galaxy, they were actually given a star Christus. Which means refuge in stellar language. So they were greeted and given a home. And actually, the Andromeda galaxy is a yin galaxy, so it's ruled by the goddess, whereas we're tilted yang. Andromeda is yin. And you would think, okay, wow, they serve the goddess. They have a feminine orientation. They'd be very comfortable. Wow, they're in the Andromeda galaxy. But no, I mean, we have to realize the emotional patterns of the wounds they brought with them. So we basically had four groups that manifested here. There was some that were reacting with very militantly, vengefully, let me attack before being attacked. Some were just totally defeated, fearful, victimized, absolutely no energy to respond, which ironically draws the pattern of violence from others. They're so limpid that if people have rage, like the militant ones who had rage, they would project violence onto these people because they were so limpid and they needed a place to put their rage out on. Then you had the group that went into complete isolation and couldn't function as a group at all, because being with others just meant pain, and you just leave me alone. I am a loner. And then you had the poor hybrids who just nobody would talk to, completely lost, who, as I said, wouldn't be touched or explained or anything. So what happened over time is they were also given a planet toga and a moon, and they started, it's almost like a mystery play. They started working out their dynamics, because at first the militant group did attack the limpid group. But you know, the limpid group was so not caring that it really wasn't fun to attack them. But it also, what happened over time is the limpid group got so much about, well, I don't care, what's the difference anyway, that they started kind of fighting back. So strangely, it made sort of they started to develop a pact. They started to develop a relationship. Then they had the loners outside, and they went through some stuff with them. And finally, they all got together on Toga, and they were sort of creating a society. Sorry, that skipped. They were creating a society of togetherness here, but not with the hybrids. The hybrids are still on the outs. They were the scapegoats. But a very interesting thing happened. They had done enough work to sort of resolve some of these injuries by learning how to unite, even though it wasn't perfect, that grace happened. Grace meaning the divine force brought something forward to assist them. You know, they had put enough effort in it, basically. And what happened is, from the Milky Way galaxy, from the Peacock star, which is 24 Capricorn, and it's actually, we think it's a peacock up there, and we think there's a telescope up there, but in cosmic history, underneath all these constellations that show up there, there is a huge black panther, and the stars on it are all great feline stars. And the Peacock star is a seventh dimensional star. It's the utter cradle of the nation of the great felines, because it represents everything that they are: the flame of divine truth, freedom's eternal fire, right use of free will, freedom as a sacral tool for fulfilling your destiny. And what happened is, from the Peacock star, a beautiful goddess leader jaguar, Myanmar Ankh, was sent to the Andromeda galaxy to help those exiles and to help them totally heal so that they could come back to the Milky Way galaxy. So here we have her, another picture of her. She's a very luminous jaguar queen, and she united the colonies with the most amazing wisdom, because she took all the different qualities of the feline that are kind of, were edgy, you know, that not quite being able to group or cooperate, and she took them and rose them. She rose them to a higher level. She elevated them vibrationally, basically, created a group cohesion, which is not easy to do with a cat. But I do want to read you something. I'm going to paraphrase. I have some translated, I Google translate some stuff I can get from Hungary. And there's more information about what she did, and it's pretty fascinating. So I want to paraphrase it. They said that it's interesting that perhaps linear in Earth time, although we don't know, it seemed like the way she worked had something to do with the Egyptian culture, or at least she called the Egyptian cosmology in, because she created a very similar world on their planet, with pyramids, pyramid-like temples, sphinx-like statues that are very reminiscent of Egypt. Let's see what else. She brought peace and strength and pure, unquestionable wisdom. And she even managed to integrate the hybrids. In fact, the idea of the hybrids being the best of both, I mean, didn't work in this genetic experiment, but energetically, she actually was able to do that, because you can imagine what could happen if you could bring these two together for real in a true energetic way.
And
All right.
also her name, Leslie, is I mean, me and my Ankh, the Ankh is also very connected to Egypt. So I think that's really interesting. And although Sekhmet is not traditionally seen as a jaguar, I think she's more of a lioness. As we're going to hopefully find out later in this journey, we do have the concept here in Mexico of the white jaguar woman, who is somewhat commensurate with Sekhmet, but in a slightly altered form. So I find that really, really interesting, that connection to Egypt, and how that may yet evolve into a bigger story as yet
Well,
realized.
yeah, and I don't have it in these slides, but uh, the stars that come up before the dawn, the stars that come up before Sirius, I think they're called the dog stars. It's the little
Uh,
Canis Minor.
Canis Minor and Canis Major.
Yeah, but in the stellar nations, they say no, it's the Canis Feline. It's actually two feminine stars. It's the heart of and the third eye of essentially like what was the goddess Basset, and she watched over Sirius. So there was a goddess watching over this culture in Egypt that was kind of brought through by Sirius. So it's almost like there was a feminine goddess or a feminine influence watching over probably a sort of masculine culture. That's a little bit to the side, but a couple other quick things about her. She was able to train the great felines in all the martial arts in the same disciplined way that the dragons know. She taught them how to control the forces of their body, to focus their mental forces, to transmute emotional impulses. Part of the reason she did this is so that they could spot an attack of astral dark forces, and especially if they were still fallen dragons, because they were going to come back. They have been coming back to the Milky Way galaxy. We'll get there. They're really coming back now, but it's been going on. But this year they're marching in. So let's see if there's anything else here.
And also, Leslie, I'm just thinking about something that you said. I hope my internet connection is good. I'm here in a hotel in Tula, interestingly, which is something for another discussion, and so the internet's a little wobbly. But I think, when I think about the energetic mix of the dragons and the cat, to me, the dragon is strong and powerful, and the cat is much more about agility. So we've got these two incredible skill. Oh, here we go. We've got these two incredible energetic skills that somehow, once fused, can give strength with agility, which is an incredible combination. And it's not to
Well,
say that cats aren't strong and that dragons aren't agile, but it's kind of amplifying both of those codes.
that's exactly what Khan had in mind. But in a sense, and this slide says what I just said, but yes, she actually brought that to, she brought into that agility and flexibility of the cat, which knows from within. She brought the discipline. She made them really cohesive. And that's why they could be a group and yet not lose their essential being or the feeling from within their yin qualities. All right. So now we have, I want to say, the pattern has been healed on the galactic level. That's what Myanmar means. This is the year 2024 that the dragon and who's been healed, we'll look at that in a minute, on the galactic level, and the great feline who's been healed in this way on the galactic level is pouring back to the earth. That's part of the energetics we're feeling, right? That's pushing on our our latent wounds. On earth, none of those patterns are worked out yet, really. It's our job to embody them. We still have the militant, we still have the weak victim feeling, the loner, the hybrids are not healed at all. So let's look at, there's some very definite wounds that exhibit if you have strong great feline codes. And this is a lot of words. I'm just going to go through it quickly. I did this so I have a prompt. So first of all, very often, if you feel emotionally burdened with feelings of betrayal and guilt, don't understand, you might have some background here. often sexual issues, pains, or problems related to genitals. Which is so sad because this is a nation that represented the goddess. This is the goddess whose body is the temple, and really who our body is the temple, who are oracles for the and masters of tantra. But anyway, often menstrual pains, bleeding, cramps, severe bleeding cramps, premenstrual aggravations. Women can also feel an inexplicable disgust for aspects of sexuality, especially if they encounter raw manpower or a man with strong dragon codes. And sometimes they might so you might fall in love with someone and it feels kind of great and exciting, but if they have strong dragon codes and you have a strong feline code, and this can happen with men or women, something wakes up at some point often that there's a disgust that happens and the woman closes her body or her soul gates and starts to feel not good about intimacy. There can be pains in the sacral chakra or the abdominal cavity. And the interesting thing is the power of the great felines opens from the sacral chakra, and the power of the dragon opens from the solar chakra. So if you have hybrid codes, you can also just sort of be dropped, sort of stuck in the level of the second and third chakras in a way, with this continuous struggle between your emotional will and your free will. I mean, it doesn't mean that you're not going to, be a spiritual person and be doing things, but if you notice, if you have patterns where you just can't get out of this kind of tussle between what you feel and what you want to do, it may be related here. When women get into this kind of struggle, they can often project onto men and fight with them, not trust them. If women with cat codes marry a dragon, they can have difficulty conceiving because there's sort of an unconscious immunity almost to taking the dragon seed. There may be a man with very strong great feline codes who just couldn't bear to incarnate as a woman again. But then again, they're in a man's body now and sort of alienated by their own manliness. So they might seek feminine things. And as I said before, because the soul aspects were pushed away from the great feline stars in the Milky Way galaxy, if you came with a lot of great feline codes, you might have had sort of a withered energy feel in a weaker body. Okay. I thought I had a slide before, I guess I didn't, but when they got all rebellious, before they went to Sheraton for the pillow talk, they had grouped on Beta Leonis Minoris. So if that's in our code, it's kind of an indication that we have a pretty deep, great feline history, and that we originally were part of this rebellion. This star, though, has been transformed into a galactic fate correction center. So the great felines who did remain in the Milky Way galaxy, which weren't that many, actually came to this star and were able to unite, and they have learned to master the supreme will in the noblest sense. So there has been some learning happening in this galaxy as well. Now, there is actually a Jaguar constellation, and there's two stars in it. There's the Corcoroli, that's just the heart of the Jaguar, and the Shara is the third eye of the Jaguar. And as it's seen in this, we name that constellation the Canis Venatici, and we see it as two hunting dogs on a leash by the booties, jumping towards the bear, but it's actually a leaping jaguar. So it's just one of those projected misconceptions that we have that rewrites our cosmic history. And there's a purpose and a mission code to the Jaguar, and that's to recognize and oppose the dark astral shadow forces and take up the fight against the shadow forces. And they do this in the sacred way of the shamans. just as you know from everything you've been saying. But this is also true on a stellar level. So there's a special ability, especially if you have a soul aspect living on this star, to detect astral energies, smell the astral presence, and you can stay in the energy field of a low vibration and seal off the shadow gate. There's a bold courage to attack and expel forces of darkness. And really, if you've designed your stellar mantle, your remembering field, when you came down to have these stars, part of you wants to come to Earth and teach and demonstrate defeating fear. And we can know that the astral forces around one who have these stars isn't necessarily due to a resonance for needing karmic settlement, because the shadow forces that they're engaging with are present in line with their destiny and their mission to oppose these forces. It's not because of their karma. All right, now we're going back to the dragons. So let's just say that's a piece of cosmic history that happened. We're seeing that the felines were healed. They're coming back. What's happened with the dragons? Well, after this whole attack, when the great felines were pushed out, the fallen ones were imprisoned in Beten Kairos, which is in the belly of the Cetus, and it's a galactic judgment center. It's like a timeout. It's a chamber of mirrors where you get to see what you've done. Ideally, you see that they've been transgressions, and you ask for redemption, and you come back to the light. But there are a number of fallen forces who just didn't. They couldn't. I mean, part of the reason is they had burned their gnosis threads, their connection between their heart and the higher knowing. But finally, the Galactic Council realized they're not going to learn anything. They're part of creation. They need to be released to have more experiences to try to understand what they're doing so that they can evolve. And they were released. Handcuffs off. So with that release, we talk about the latent shadow coming up. The latent shadow came up in a reincarnation of the Commander Khan in Santa Elia. And he was joined by a reincarnation of the fallen angel, Satanal. And on the star Algol, they actually did an act of unico magico, black magic, and there's another hybrid that was formed, another hybrid genome, which is like the Satan type creation, which went on to wreak havoc. We're not going to talk about all that. We kind of know that. But I do want to say that Omega Orionis, in the middle of the Orion constellation, the heart of the hunter, was the cradle of the dragon nation. And when the commander did that, it exploded because it was so, every star or planet holds in its core, the Holy Spirit is there holding the idea for that star or planet that the divine mind has for that expression of that entity. And when Khan merged, the Holy Spirit, the tension, it couldn't take it. It just exploded. It was too dissonant with the divine mind. So we can imagine the dragon warrior wounds too. So we have plenty of dragons who left with a mutual lust for power. But then we have some who felt that they were being obedient and correct in following orders, because there was very much a command type of functioning or hierarchy in that nation. It's just inbuilt, and it's meant to be there. It's okay. So any feelings of guilt, shame, self-recrimination could come from that too, which could create either a very self-punishing attitude or perhaps the necessity to project blame out because of these feelings. of course, the lost, confused feelings can happen, particularly because now there's no central leader, and this is a soul family that, as I said, is designed with a commander. The Holy Spirit, which is the quantum field that holds everything, I mean, held the imprint of what a true commander would be. So it kind of became their leader, but the Holy Spirit is really amorphous and hard to follow. So, and I want to step back and say, think about this. These are all parts of us. And the part that was supposed to protect and know about divine will fell or fell out. And the part of us that was supposed to know about free will fell out. So these are parts of us. These are us as cosmic humans. These are us as incarnated beings now, trying to figure this out. What's divine will? What's free will? So we'll hold that thought because we might get back to it. Then there were some who did not follow Khan, and they were expelled or probably killed, which may give them a potential victim mentality that we're living with. With a victim mentality, you either wither or you lash out, you project. So we can see these are all patterns in our human. I don't know if it's our human nature, but they're in our human experience, and they have a bigger inception point. Now, the energy of Khan is still around, and Khan came back in 2011. Both these warrior nations came back into our collective consciousness. And at that point, they were just instilling the idea that maybe a warrior wasn't so dastardly. I mean, because the way that we act for all these millennia now with all these wars, there's really not a lot noble anymore about war. So it started to put in the imprint, the rethinking of standing up for a cause. And that was what the year 2011 was about. Now we're in 2024, where we have, I'm going to get to it in a minute, we have a healed dragon pattern, and we have the healed great feline pattern. They're flooding back in. But Khan is also here in a last-ditch kind of effort to pull, there's souls that he has deals with, or he made pacts with. You promised me this. He may have put auric seals on them or in them, which is also something that can affect the body. So that's another physical aspect potentially. Now, what was happening in the galactic scene, this whole idea of sparring with oppositional forces started to be used differently. It started to be used, sparring was used as a way to raise one's own qualities, not using it against the other as an endless back and forth trying to win, where you get a winner and a loser. It was instead like, oh, you're challenging me. Okay, what do I need to do to meet that challenge and make myself even better? And I'm doing that because I want to be a better warrior, because I have a noble cause. And you've said this before. I think you've done this in some of you've talked about this, David, about using the polarities to make yourself better. But it's the same idea. I mean, you're onto the dragon healed code there.
Well, it's the catalyzation force, Leslie, that comes from polarity. It's actually day 2 of any Mayan wave spell. It's working with that energy of dynamic kinetic force to create an activation point. We need those kind of polarities to work with that. And I think that sparring or debating, there's another aspect of that Tibetans like to do, and that can get quite vigorous sometimes too, from what I remember from my time in the Himalayas. But yeah, I think it's fascinating that these auric seals also are getting released in 2024. And of course, you know, that's something I've talked to you about before from a personal level. So I totally resonate with so much of this. And I think that we're coming to that point where those things have to be freed so that our bodies can really start to heal now from all of these traumas that you've just been sharing.
Right. But really, I'm glad I couldn't quite remember what phase it was, but the second day catalyzation is exactly represented by this, and it's choosing the higher response of how to use the polarities that we live within. And, polarity is probably an elevated form of duality where you just go back and forth. So what happened though on Omega Orionis, there's that exploded star and there's a big nebula under it. With all this sparring, little stars have started to be reborn in this healing. And very specifically, 2 new stars have been born or are becoming born. I don't know what phase they're in, but they are actually, it's the birth of 2 new dragon grandmasters now, instead of the idea of one commander. And I'm not going to say their names correctly, but there's Sante Khan Mar Teo Rock and Thork Vane Dom Amarind. And let me tell you about—
Don't roll off the tongue easily, do they?
No. So what we had with Sante is in his birth, he did this through the initiation of Vega, and that's the 6th initiation of the dragon, and that is learning the right use of power. And this is where the dragon failed, in fact. That's where Khan just started going power hungry. So he was following the deepest impetus to raise himself in this sparring. And his inner questions were, show me how I can best guard divine will, divine order. How can I guard the bastions of light again? How can I best serve the higher divine plan with my physical and mental strength? Oh, sorry. Next, we have, I guess I'm going to call him Thork, he awakened in the Orion Nebula with the star by healing through Thuban, the star Thuban, which is at 738 Virgo, which is the 7th virtue of the dragon, which is knowing when to show mercy. So he had to fall through the corridor of the warrior's guilt and just cling to the light. And he had to really surrender, accept redemption, and allow himself to forgive himself and forgive everything, and allow himself to be risen in grace through Thuban or through mercy to a new state of being by accepting redemption, which is actually quite a model for us. But now we have these 2 dragon masters. Now there is another warrior prototype that came in a slightly different way, but I think it's worth bringing up since we're talking about warriors. And it comes off in the wolf constellation, the Lupus constellation. And this has to do, many of the dragons who felt very lost with no mission were noticed. They were Roman soldiers in Roman times with all the wars when Christ was born. And Jesus noticed them, and he basically pulled them in and he gave them a new mission. He said, your mission, you can follow the command really of guarding and defending the temple. But the temple, it was a new concept at that time. The temple is the heart, and the heart is the portal to higher consciousness, and everything that the Christ consciousness instilled and taught then with bringing those frequencies in 2,000 years ago. So our task now really is to embody the risen warrior codes, and for us to use them to find the subtle balance between how do we use our free will within the ecosystem of divine will, so everybody wins. And we move to a cooperative Aquarian age, into where we can all be ourselves, but yet we can exist in a group. And basically, awareness, which we've just tried to bring with this conversation, use of our will, deep commitment, but also forgiveness for our own selves and for each other.
So thank you, Leslie, for that wonderful presentation. So much to discuss there, and hopefully it resonates with many people in the group and on the path of the Jaguar. Certainly it resonates a lot with me. I think I can identify with both the dragons and the cats. And, hopefully everyone's been able to follow this. I have been experiencing some technological issues. I'm here in a city that is probably very much a part of this story of the dragons and the cats, and not just those stellar nations, but also the arthropods. So we are having a few opposing forces here. But Leslie, would you like to just wrap up with a few comments to put a nice bookend to this particular transmission from yourself?
When you got kicked off, I did pretty much wrap up and say that, it's our charge now really to bring this all in to raise patterns up. It's our charge to embody it. And also, I think if we do feel we have more awareness now, if we take this in and we can understand that some of what's happening coming through our body or our emotions or our mental level is from a bigger place. And when we see it's a part of a larger pattern, it's like easier to pull the thread out of the karmic knot. And that's what we have to do, because we are here now. I mean, we're literally, especially since 1987, when the harmonic convergence came and the timeline for an ascension came parallel to the timeline for an apocalypse. We are literally here finishing out all our karmas at once. So that's why, and the thing about realizing that we're on these stars is we're concurrently here and we're there. And we're not just on one star, we're like on 50 stars. We've got all these soul particles and they're talking to us. And it's really quite beautiful when you can get fluid with it. You'll get fluid like the cat with it. So we also have to know, I didn't bring this up, we may know it from other things, but Earth is designated in our solar system as the planet of redemption, meaning turning around all these patterns, blending and harmonizing all 13 stellar nations, blending or making complementary the masculine and feminine force. There's 7 major karmic patterns that have been plaguing our solar system for eons, and they're spoken of really in the galactic myths. We just saw a little picture of it. But yeah, I think that we just need to take that inner will. The first initiation of the dragon is the initiation into fire, will, and we need to apply ourselves. And I think it'll be interesting to do that in the context of this expedition you're doing, because you'll be seeing signs on the ground probably of some of this cosmic history, where you've intimated already, like what happened here?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to add some context to this, and hopefully the internet will hold while I share this, we are in the city of Tula here, which is very possibly linked to Atlantean times. It's also very linked to Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, who probably carries the qualities of bird, serpent, and dragon, possibly even cat somewhere too. But also what we see is that the cats were removed from many of the temples here, which somehow is commensurate with the story that you've just been sharing. And we understand that there was a very strong feline culture that probably spanned most of the north of South America, if not all of South America, all the way up through Guatemala and Belize into the Yucatan, into what was traditionally called the Mayan heartland. So there's lots of things here for us to pick at. But also I find it so fascinating from my own work over the years, working with dragon energy, but also ending up having to clear people's fields of the more, what I would now recognize as fallen dragons. Now, I cannot say that all kind of demonic quality beings are necessarily fallen dragons, but certainly the bigger, more powerful ones that are super old and very strong and also have magic, probably from the process that we saw there with the hybridization. Those beings have been ones that I have ended up having to remove a lot. So for me personally, a lot of what you just shared there was fascinating. I'm like, wow, so someone who's worked with dragons, but then ended up having to basically hunt my own kind to remove them because of the ill will they were causing others is a fascinating kind of juxtaposition that I'm going to meditate on, because I'm like, wow, that's an interesting thought. But also, I think that we cannot talk about Beta and Katos at the moment without looking at the fact that Chiron has been sat on top of Beta and Katos most of 2024, and is probably going to, by my recognition, still be within orb for another year or so yet, because Chiron doesn't move very quickly. So we can see that we have this opportunity to really resolve all of the things that you've been talking about. And perhaps sometimes it can be overwhelming to say, well, I've had these body issues and this and this and this, and I've worked on them and they just don't get fixed. So do you have any advice, Leslie, for those people who maybe have experiencing difficult body codes that don't want to heal, or people who've got long-term degenerative physical conditions that maybe are linked to this? Is there anything, maybe even from your own life experiences, that you'd like to share?
I don't know. That's a hard one to get into because
It's
sometimes,
probably a very long question, right?
oh,
One for a dodgy internet connection, perhaps.
well, I have to say from my own experience, you have to use it as trying to make yourself better. It's hard,
Yeah.
meaning like that whole catalyzation thing. And sometimes if you just don't have the energy, what do you do? I don't know. I mean, I've been through different things myself. I've had major surgery 6 times because of these codes, honestly. Um,
Yeah.
but
That's why I'm asking you that question, because I know that.
well, I mean, it's a long story, but I think I put at the end when you got kicked off using your will, the first, there's something about you have to make a decision and just try to use your will. There's something about, um, but I don't want to sound holier than thou. It's not easy, and I don't think everybody
Mm.
should be able to do it, but it is coming out more now, with Joe Dispenza's work and stuff that you can change the energy field and bring it into the physical. Um, so I know with the catalyst of my, really deep physical declines at times, I just use my will to say, I don't know, I'm going to persevere through it, like one step at a time. Like what I
Yeah,
used
yeah.
to do actually is I used to actually see myself putting on like a yoke, like I was pulling an ox cart. And I said, just use your energy this way to to feel like you're pulling a pattern through for the collective to the neural net. Like even if you die, so what? You just let's go forward with this idea
It's
that
only a sim anyway. You get to come back again and have another go
I
at some
just
point.
create another. I might have 5 other bodies with different, soul aspects going in different countries, right?
Right. I've often actually wondered that. Are there like other versions of me wandering around in other bodies? Once when I was in Ecuador doing my training, I met another Scorpio born on the same day as me, exactly the same day, the same year, who was Colombian. I was like, we had a long conversation. It's like, oh my gosh, we're like brothers. Like you're a Colombian version of me, and I'm like a Welsh version of you or something. And we had an amazing evening. We ended up going back to this guy's house. It was a long time ago, down in Quito. And it was just one of those weirdest experiences. Like, wow, if I was to meet a version of myself as Colombian, it would be this guy. And he was probably thinking the same thing about me. So, who knows? I mean, we're playing with this a little bit, right? But also just to add something to what you said there, one of those codes is being the victim. And we've talked about this quite a bit, I
Yeah,
think, over
that's a
the
big
course of
one.
this last year. And that's the first step, because the world is your mirror, which is also why some of us are going through this, because of maybe previous karmic actions that we're now having mirrored back to us, so that we can learn maybe the pain that we inflicted on others at other points. That then leads you to a level of compassion. At least that's what I'm discovering. Because when you have these painful body codes and you're struggling with them, as you will know, on a day-to-day basis, or your mobility or your ability to be free and move around has been taken from you, it's difficult, it's challenging. And yet somehow, if you go into the victim mode, all you do is keep attracting more of the same stuff. So you kind of have to rise above that and say, well, I came in at this time. I clearly came in for some codes that need to be rectified. I acknowledge those and I'm open to fixing them. And that has to be the first step, like you said, that kind of very disciplined mind of will and intention. I want to get better. I'm not a victim. I'm ready to receive whatever it is that spirit wants to teach me. And I think it's tough.
Yes.
It's not easy to say these things, but not
Well,
so easy to do.
it helps you flip your seat of consciousness just out of the physical. And because I really think this is part of what we're doing now anyway, especially if we get all our awareness going with all the star codes or however we do it. We're flipping our consciousness into being seated in the larger light body. And oh, this is what's happening. It's a distillate of it. Oh, I'm having this experience that's challenging me. Oh, it's bringing up this pattern. Oh, okay. But you're just not right in the middle going back and forth. You're not getting caught in it. it can almost become interesting sometimes.
Well, first of all, don't take it personally, I guess.
Well,
Once we
that's a
start
big
to
one.
realize that I'm not really a person either, I'm like this conglomerate of 13 codes and probably God knows what else at some point. And so who is David? Who is Leslie? We kind of, especially in the West, are given this identity and we grow up with it and we absorb more and we start to shape it according to all of these different things. And then at some point, hopefully on the journey, we realize that we're not any of those things. And actually, we've got these wounded dragons and wounded feline aspects and slippery snake aspects and dodgy spider aspects and all of this going on. And we're like, oh my God, like I recognize my spider self, I recognize my serpent self, my dragon self, my angel self. And each one is kind of like his own character. But together, they also form me in this moment. But each one has got his own story. And as I've shared with you before from some of my medicine journeys, I've met my dragon self, I've met my angel self, and I've had to make friends with them. And the dragon self, he was the toughest one of all, man. Big badass guy that just didn't want to give up his status. He was wounded and was carrying all of that, but also super powerful. The dragons are really, really powerful beings. And so when you encounter fallen dragons, you're encountering a very, very strong force, a primordial force. And particularly if it's been hybridized with some of those nastier sides of the fallen angels, then well, we can see from our world stage what happens when you get inverted
Right,
dragons
right.
on the world
You know,
stage.
because they still have power. The angelic power can sort of create invisibility. They don't have
Yeah.
the power to go higher in consciousness, but they still have the tricks, that they gained from being.
Right.
But
Well, yeah, come on.
well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I
I
was just
just
going to say invisibility is definitely a more of an astral ability. You don't need invisibility in the fifth dimension above because what are you trying to hide from? That's only something that you really need in the shadow world of the fourth dimension or the lower astrals. Is like, well, but this is also interesting because the cats, particularly the black jaguars, they also carry that ability to be invisible. Incredibly well, particularly in the astral planes. They'll creep up on you. You won't even know that they were there. And I've had
Mhm.
that experience more than once with cats. And so I find it interesting, particularly when we're able to very strongly access the other realms visually and to have these energies come to us and to experience them in our body, but also in the third dimension through these experiences. And so that's not everybody's pathway. I understand that. But for me personally, that's how I've got to understand many of the things that you've shared, because when we go into the emotional realms and allow ourselves to be open to that, we can start to feel these things a bit more succinctly. And particularly in the density of the 3D world that we have been living in, which I think is now freeing up, it's been difficult to access that information, and deliberately so, because once we start accessing it, chances are we might start releasing it. And that doesn't suit the powers that be or the powers that have been. So I don't know, just
Well,
some
we
thoughts there.
couldn't access it also because literally when we were not in the photon belt, you figure if a lot of our soul particles are living or larger light body among the stars,
Yeah, that's also
not in the
true, right?
photon belt, stars would only come through when they conjunct the sun and then maybe hit, they would be in the solar system and they'd hit us on some level. So it's
Yeah,
literally, we didn't have aspects to our broader soul nature. But
makes
now that
sense.
we're fully in the photon belt and it doesn't have to arbitrate through the sun, I mean, they still do
Yeah.
come through the sun in a very strong way with a conjunct, but it's coming at us from every single direction. We're in a hologram now. And then we've got, you just alluded to, we've got all these parts. Some of them are absolutely Christed. Some of them are pretty fallen. So what is the job? Our job is to balance and harmonize them. And that was the mission we were given as cosmic humans. And it's actually quite an amazing thing. So if you start really flipping your consciousness into being all these parts, and it becomes a lot more fun during the day to work with that level of, like, in your consciousness while you're doing your 3D stuff. It's interesting because you can almost start to feel like, how the Milky Way looks like a spine. You can almost feel
Mhm.
like you have this subconscious thing where you are actually your light body with all these stars, and you're kind of working your 3D life, but through the stellar ways, and the Milky Way is your spine. So I don't know. We're getting a
No.
little silly, but not really.
Well, no, as we come to the end of this, and I realize that we're running the risk of another internet drop here, and we're probably way beyond our permission time. But something you just said there, or two things really, I'd like to finish with. First of all, you've said this before about the star Maya, or the home star of the ancient Mayan ancestors, the cosmic Mayan ancestors. Their cycle only comes in conjunction with planet Earth during this period,
Yeah.
the high on light. So that's interesting. So we literally could not connect to those parts of ourselves to bring them back on board, because if they had got fragmented, maybe, or separated, they literally have not been accessible. And I think that that's part of what is happening now, is that all of these codes, all of these bits of ourselves, speaking from my own experience, are coming back to us, and we can start to put them back into a more holistic version of ourselves, which is all of these 13 codes. So I just wrote here something. We are becoming again the cosmic humans we once were.
But
And
think
have
about,
always been, really, but somehow we're having to bring them more consciously into our awareness in this moment.
but we kicked them out. We
I
said we,
know, I know.
and then, actually, then that's the larger story in cosmic history. Why
Yeah.
did we get our 12-strand DNA cut to 2 and become this physically concentrated? And because that was
Yeah.
our karmic come around. And what are we doing now? We're coming back into what our original created intention was, or we're trying to, and we're asked to. But I think all these provocateurs are, you've said this before, a lot of these things are provocateurs because they're showing us, they're pushing us to do it. Even the
That
arthropods,
is
which,
the paradox and the beauty of
yeah,
duality,
the
right?
arthropods, which are really the worst of the worst in the sense of what they're doing, but their whole mission as a nation is to be a chamber of mirrors, to record what's happening and show us. That's their true mission. So, and
I
if you,
know, and it's fascinating. We talked about this, right, in relation to Polaris and the sort of the depth of the human pain that they have as a library with which to project it us and get us out of shape, which is actually pretty, I don't know, rude, first of all, but also not very pleasant to experience. But secondly, what it's doing is it's showing us where we've got vulnerabilities, like, why am I triggered? Why am I reacting? Why am I in pain?
exactly.
Why are you messing with my head? Why is my head exploding? All of these questions, uncomfortable as they can be in the body in the moment, or even in the emotional realm sometimes, what they're doing is really toughening us up and saying, hey, you've got this problem, this problem, this, well, not problems, but issues or traumas that need to be resolved. And we're actually doing you the favor of showing you. So it's that famous Bill
Yeah.
Gates meditation. He is the greatest man
Good.
on the planet for doing all of these
Yeah.
terrible things to us so that we
Right.
can wake up. Thank you, Uncle Bill. I don't know.
Yeah. Right. It all comes back to day 2, right? Catalyzation. It always,
Yes,
yeah.
that's the point. So we have to thank these people for providing us, because all of these traumas that we have that they're highlighting for us is actually trapped latent kinetic energy in our field. And if we can catalyze it, boom, then we can
Yeah.
explode the bigger
Well, the
versions of
other thing
ourselves.
is, they're also mirrors for us. They're actually that's part of us. And
Yeah.
what they're mirrors for not taking the initiation, not allowing yourself to be renewed by creation. Then you have to steal energy from others. And we're at a point now of deep initiation. I mean, if I look at the stars, we talked about it a little bit on the cosmic history shows. Saturn's holding Ashenar. If you look at the astrology through the stars, we are like initiation or bait and Katos. We are in the chamber of mirrors, examine. So we are asked to jump off. And jump off means the mystery of letting go. You don't know what's coming next. So we'll see.
Well, I mean, just to finish on that note with Pluto, where it is at the moment, Pluto is in a square to both Andromeda Galaxy and Mirac, which is two of the bigger sort of catastrophe stories in the cosmic history code. So I feel that Pluto is really wanting us to look at the complete breadth of our wounding that we might be carrying and saying, hey, now is really the time to put all of that to bed.
Yeah.
Because if you want to ascend, you have to. And I know it's an uncomfortable truth that many people in the spiritual community don't really want to hear, but it's like if you don't do the work and don't heal
Yeah.
yourself from release, you're not going to ascend to those higher codes, because your density is going to hold you here in this more dense version of Earth. And so it's up to you. It's a choice. We all have a choice to make. Do you want to go on that journey, or do you want to stay in a place of victimization and pain, I guess?
It's all resonance. That's what the scales of Anubis are.
Resonance. Yeah.
They say you weigh your heart, and it just means it has too much shadow. You can't
Yeah.
resonate to the other level. So you're asked to stay at this level. It's not a punishment. It's just a law
Oh,
of
no.
physics. You don't resonate here yet. So
Well, that's why we come into this sort of polarity stroke duality. And I'm going to meditate on what you said about duality and polarity there later. But I think that that's the point. It's not personal. It's just a cause and effect in action. Karma is action, really. And the world is a mirror. And yes, I think it's the scales of Mars, right, that get balanced there when we go for our judgment day. And it's like, the whole thing about the heart being light as a feather is like you just said. It's an analogy of how much density or shadow, how are we still carrying? And so if the scales tilt, it's like, I think we still got a bit too much, boyo. I think we need to do some more balancing work there and have a look at it. And in the end, it's all for our own benefit as we evolve as some kind of element of great spirits consciousness.
Right. And that scales of Anubis is a star Bellatrix. You're going to find these energies. These are stellar worlds. Everything that we sort of think about or have is represented in some stellar world, and we are living there as well. So,
Right, and that's a beautiful place to finish, I think. So on that very cosmic note, thank you, Leslie, for sharing again your wonderful knowledge of all of this and bringing it into a place which hopefully makes sense to people. And I think that we're about to get rained on here, so I'm going to have to move in a minute. But thank you so much for all of that.
all right.
And
Good
hopefully
night.
all of those traumas have resonated with people and somehow can help us to start releasing them. So thank you again, Leslie.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for watching this. And Leslie, do you want, as a final shout, just to point people towards your new website?
Oh, we can put it in the link. Yeah, I took all the information off of the Stellar Nation's website is fine. It's in English, but I consolidated what's really important to us as English seekers. And I created a forum part so we can have discussions. And I do some Zoom calls and such on there. So yes, I can put that. I mean, we can put it in the links. It's stellar/nation/english.com. I'll send it to you. Thank you for mentioning it.
Thanks. You're welcome. Well, thank you again, Leslie. Thank you again, everybody. And thank you most of all to our cosmic ancestors for giving us the opportunity to explore these parts of ourselves through this wonderful material and sharing that Leslie's brought to us today. So thank you, everybody. We'll see you all again for another transmission here on the Path of the Jaguar very soon. Bye for now.
Thanks. Good night.